Lies in Extremis. The philosopher Immanuel Kant believed that lying was unethical in all cases, even in an attempt to stop the murder of an innocent person. As with many of Kant's philosophical views, his position on lying was not so much argued for as presumed, like a religious precept. Though the precept "never tell a lie" has the obvious virtue of clarity, in practice this rule can produce behavior that only a psychopath might endorse. A total prohibition against lying is also ethically incoherent in anyone but a true pacifist. If you think that it can ever be appropriate to injure or kill a person in self-defense, or in defense of another, it makes no sense to rule out lying in the same circumstances. I cannot see any reason to take Kant seriously on this point, which does not mean that lying is easily justified. Even as a means to ward off violence, lying often closes the door to acts of honest communication that might be more effective or produce important moral breakthroughs. In those circumstances where we deem it obviously necessary to lie, we have generally determined that the person to be deceived is both dangerous and unreachable by any recourse to the truth. In other words, we have judged the prospects of establishing a genuine relationship with him to be non-existent. For most of us, such circumstances arise very rarely in life, if ever. And even when they seem to, it is often possible to worry that lying was the easy and less than perfectly ethical way out. Let us take an extreme case as a template for others in the genre. A known murderer is looking for a boy whom you are now sheltering in your home. The murderer is standing at your door and wants to know whether you have seen his intended victim. The temptation to lie is perfectly understandable, but merely lying might produce other outcomes which you do not intend. If you say that you saw the boy climb your fence and continue down the block, the murderer may leave, only to kill someone else's child. Even in this unhappy case, lying might have been your best hope for protecting innocent life. But that doesn't mean that someone more courageous or capable than you couldn't have produced a better result with the truth. Telling the truth in such a circumstance need not amount to acquiescence. The truth in this case could well be, "I wouldn't tell you even if I knew, and if you take another step, I'll put a bullet in your head." If lying seems the only option, given your fear or physical limitations, it clearly shifts the burden of combating evil onto others. Granted, your neighbors might be better able to assume this burden than you are. But someone must assume it eventually. If no one else, the police must tell murderers the truth. Their behavior will not be tolerated. It is far more common to find ourselves in situations in which, though we are tempted to lie, honesty will lead us to form connections with other people who might otherwise have been adversaries. In this vein, I recall an encounter I had with a U.S. Customs officer upon returning from my first trip to Asia. The year was 1987, but it might as well have been the summer of love. I was 20, had hair down to my shoulders, and was dressed like an Indian rickshaw driver. For those charged with enforcing our nation's drug laws, it would have only been prudent to subject my luggage to special scrutiny. Happily, I had nothing to hide. "Where are you coming from?" the officer asked, glancing skeptically at my backpack. "India, Nepal, Thailand," I said. "Did you take any drugs while you were over there?" As it happens, I had. The temptation to lie was obvious. Why speak to a customs officer about my recent drug use? But I had no real reason not to tell the truth, apart from the risk that it would lead to an even more thorough search of my luggage, or perhaps my person, than had already commenced. "Yes," I said. The officer stopped searching my bag and looked up. "Which ones did you take?" "I smoked pot a few times, and, I tried opium in India." "Opium?" "Yes." "Opium or heroin?" "It was opium." "You don't hear much about opium these days." "I know, it was the first time I'd ever tried it." "Are you carrying any drugs with you now?" "No." The officer eyed me warily for a moment, and then returned to searching my bag. Given the nature of our conversation, I reconciled myself to being there for a very long time. I was, therefore, as patient as a tree, which was a good thing, because the officer was now examining my belongings as though any one item, a toothbrush, a book, a flashlight, a bit of nylon cord, might reveal the deepest secrets of the universe. "What is opium like?" he asked after a time. I told him. In fact, over the next 10 minutes I told this lawman everything I knew about the use of mind-altering substances. Eventually he completed his search and closed my luggage, and one thing was perfectly obvious at the end of our encounter. We both felt very good about it. A more quixotic self stands revealed. I'm not sure that I would have precisely the same conversation today, but I probably wouldn't work quite so hard to open such a novel channel of communication. Nevertheless, I find that a willingness to be honest, especially about things that one might be expected to conceal, often leads to much more gratifying exchanges with other human beings. Of course, if I had been carrying illegal drugs, my situation would have been very different. One of the worst things about breaking the law is that it puts you at odds with an indeterminate number of other people. This is among the many corrosive effects of unjust laws. They tempt peaceful and otherwise honest people to lie so as to avoid being punished for behavior that is ethically blameless. Mental accounting. One of the greatest problems for the liar is that he must keep track of his lies. Some people are better at this than others. Psychopaths can assume the burden of mental accounting without any obvious distress. This is not an accident. They are psychopaths. They do not care about others and are quite happy to sever relationships whenever the need arises. Some people are monsters of egocentricity, but lying unquestionably comes at a psychological cost for the rest of us. Lies beget other lies. Unlike statements of fact, which require no further work on our part, lies must be continually protected from collisions with reality. When you tell the truth, you have nothing to keep track of. The world itself becomes your memory, and if questions arise, you can always point people back to it. You can even reconsider certain facts and honestly change your views, and you can openly discuss your confusion, conflicts, and doubts with all comers. A commitment to the truth is naturally purifying of error. But the liar must remember what he said, and to whom, and must take care to maintain his falsehoods in the future. This can require an extraordinary amount of work, all of which comes at the expense of authentic communication and free attention. The liar must weigh each new disclosure, whatever the source, to see whether it might damage the facade he has built. And all these stresses accrue, whether or not anyone discovers that he has been lying. Tell enough lies, and the effort needed to keep your audience in the dark eventually becomes unsustainable. While you might be spared a direct accusation of dishonesty, many people will conclude, for reasons they might be unable to pinpoint, that they cannot trust you. You will begin to seem like someone who is always dancing around the facts, because you most certainly are. Many of us have known people like this. No one ever quite confronts them, but everyone begins to treat them like creatures of fiction. Such people are often quietly shunned, for reasons they probably never understand. In fact, suspicion often grows on both sides of a lie. Research indicates that liars trust those they deceive less than they otherwise might, and the more damaging their lies, the less they trust or even like their victims. It seems that in protecting their egos and interpreting their own behavior as justified, liars tend to deprecate the people they lie to.